The leader of the League of Villains versus the King of All Curses, Ryomen Sukuna and Shigaraki Tomura, are the two most twisted and dangerous villains in their entire verse, showing clear dominance and supremacy to the majority of the cast, so much so that their entire verse, whether it's heroes or sorcerers, needs to team up in order to stand a chance. Otherwise, the world would certainly be doomed. In this video, I decided to discuss both of their general abilities, stats and more to determine who would be the more dominant fighter between the two. But before that, do not forget to flash the subscribe button and the notification bell for more of these matchup videos. You can also become a member of this channel, getting granted exclusive videos such as reviews, reactions and character analysis. Thank you. Ryomen Sukuna is the strongest character in the entire series, solidified his claim by defeating Satoru Gojo, who is also hailed as the strongest sorcerer of this modern age, showcased his clear supremacy over 99% of the characters of the series, decimating every single sorcerer, all while ironically still holding back. He's one of these villains that fans starts to wonder if they are really placed in the right verse, too strong that no plan you can think of can be generated to defeat them. Now, when it comes to his general scaling, starting with physical strength, let's first address as quickly and informative as possible the false arguments people bring up to scale up the verse. First one being that the high tier characters at some degree should be above island level, since they scale above characters like Dagon, who can create an island in his domain expansion. This is obviously with assuming that creation energy would equate to how strong a character punch would be. However, if that creation feat is heavily above their average feats, it should not be equating the attack potency, especially given that Jogo's maximum technique meteor would only place him as city level in terms of AP, but his domain expansion can generate a mountain. Not to mention the fact that there are no possible ways to establish how large Dagon's island is. It could just possibly be a city-sized island, meaning it cannot be scaled to any certain degree. Second argument is that Gojo can move and talk when time is literally stopped in the prison realm, meaning he has access to infinite speed. That's honestly such a baffling argument, and you can't possibly think that, since if you do, then characters who were watching Gojo and Sukuna reacting to their speed would also have infinite reaction time, which in my opinion is such a big stretch. Having that said, where does Sukuna fall in terms of AP? Now, even when eliminating the creation feat argument, their AP scaling is still very contentious. The first meta we have comes from Jogo's maximum meteor being at best city level of AP. Sukuna scales much higher than this, with the many multipliers he attained up to this point. Being massively generous to Sukuna, his level in this spectrum would range from city to island level of AP. See, even with being generous, this is surprisingly still considered as a lowball in the JJK power scaling community, which brings us to the second meta of scaling the higher dimensional beings such as Sukuna and Gojo, with both of them being planetary. This obviously comes from Yuki Tsukumo's black hole technique that was stated by Kinjaku himself of being capable of destroying the whole world. Given that Yuki and Tengen were able to contain its energy, and that Sukuna and Gojo are reasonably in a completely different level, they should be relative or scale even above planetary levels of force. Now, I should mention of course that I personally think that this feat is an outlier, and I do not think that the JJK verse has enough force to actually destroy the planet, given that this was a last resort destructive attack and doesn't really mean Gojo or Sukuna can scale to it, or that it equates to Yuki's punching potency. But regardless, that's completely fine and would still be including this as another possibility for this specific matchup, with obviously considering that Sukuna's slashes don't really scale to this, but more so can destroy the world in a long period of time. Now, the general agreement for speed in this verse comes from the various calculations depicting multiple characters such as Hakari and Maki to being massively hypersonic plus. This obviously ignores the whole debacle of the verse capping at Naoya's Mach 3 speed, which even the author himself implied in a couple of occasions that when it comes to the science he messes it up completely. But the high-end spectrum of this comes from Kashimo's electromagnetic waves that should move at the speed of light. The king of all curses, while being heavily fatigued, not only was he able to react but dodge it proficiently, which would make him by the very least light speed in terms of combat and reaction time. Now that we have gone over Sukuna's general stats, let's take a look at his hacks and abilities. The obvious elephant in the room would be his malevolent shrine domain expansion. Enhances his already innate curse technique Cleave and Dismantle that would be landing passively in a range of 200 meters, which means it's a series of sure hit attacks that cannot be dodged. He also can create and manipulate flames for long range attacks by forming an arrow, alongside with his obviously overpowered dimensional dismantle, capable of literally slashing the fabric of the space existing in this world. Sukuna also has access to reverse curse technique, an ability he uses to instantly heal any injuries even if it's a completely lost limb as long as he has enough curse energy. Now given that we'd be using current Sukuna with assuming he's healthy, he wouldn't obviously have access to the 10 Shadows technique, meaning he cannot use Mahoraga's adaptation. With all of this being said, can Sukuna take down the big dog of the My Hero Academia verse? Tomura Shigaraki is without a doubt the most overwhelming presence in the Hero Academia verse, a villain so dangerous that can certainly bring the total annihilation of this world. Plans on tearing down the society of heroes built up by All Might by any means necessary. Now in order to classify where Shigaraki should fall at in terms of general stats, specifically speed, let's first take a look at the many feats and statements provided in the manga/anime that supports the faster than light meta in the My Hero Academia verse. For starters, in Shigaraki's fight with the strongest USA hero, he casually shoots electromagnetic waves that Star and Stripes was able to dodge, not to mention the US jets that were capable of shooting lasers that she easily intercepted before making contact and dealing damage. The second case comes from the Hero Academia movie that is considered to be canon, where Deku, before using One for All, reacted to a laser beam and jumped out of its way. These lasers later in the movie are shown to not only move at straight lines, but also be reflected when they are contacted by mirrors. The third case comes from Aoyama's naval lasers that so many characters has been shown either react to or dodge. This in several occasions are confirmed to have the same properties as light. There are also multiple other cases that bring solid arguments to the FTL meta in the My Hero Academia verse. However, if you choose to go by calcs, then Lady Nagant's bullet when targeted towards Shigaraki in chapter 379 are calced to be at 1.96% the speed of light, which makes Deku in his 400% to be at least 5 times the speed of light. And pay in mind that this is actually considered a low ball in the My Hero community. Now that we have gone over Shigaraki's combat and reaction speed, let's take a look at his attack potency. You see, there are multiple feats that current Shigaraki and Deku certainly scales above, such as Star and Stripes Intercontinental Cruise Punch that was calculated to be above country level in terms of AP. Deku and Bakugo punching away a massive storm in the movie that was calculated at continental to possibly even higher, and many other countless feats. This should put Shigaraki at general scale at country to continental levels of AP and faster than light to FTL plus levels of speed. However, the problem with Shigaraki in actuality does not rely on his physicalities, but more so his overall well-rounded and hacked abilities. The most notable one, as I'm sure everybody already knows, is his Decay quirk, an ability that allows him to disintegrate anything and anyone he touches, whether by direct contact or by spreading it by touching the ground. Works almost instantaneously, and so far we didn't see anything he cannot decay. Cannot be stopped, and the only way to avoid it is to either fly or float and not engage in close quarter combat with him, which is a very difficult task to do. He also has All for One's quirk, which essentially allows him to steal and use multiple other abilities such as Search, Air Cannon, Radio Waves, and most importantly Hyper Regeneration. This allows him to heal instantly from severe damage attacks. Tomura Shigaraki is by far, in my opinion, the best written villain in the Hero Academia verse, a character that I enjoyed throughout the whole story. But how would this demon of a villain fare up against the King of Curses, Ryomen Sukuna?
せいぜい噛みしめろ。
Now, given the nature of the power system and how different it is regarding both series, it's important to note that we would not be considering that having a quirk would be the equivalent of having a curse technique. Otherwise, Sukuna would be at a very big disadvantage since Shigaraki at any given moment can steal his technique using One for All's quirk. We'd say quirks and curse energy are two different systems, and since there are no major complications, this would not be equalized. I would also like to mention that both would be fighting with no prior knowledge of each other's abilities to make this whole matchup fair and square. And with all of this being said, we'd start by comparing both of their physical stats and see how they would stack up against each other. You see, if you choose to not include the Sukuna's planetary meta, which in my opinion is an outlier, his best scaling so far would be Einen level of attack potency, with moving and reacting to light speed attacks at best. If you choose to go by calcs, massively faster than light plus is the peak of the Jujutsu Kaisen verse. On the other hand, Shigaraki's attack potency should comfortably scale from island to country level of AP and possibly even more, with being 5 times faster than light if you choose to lowball his speed by calcs. However, if you choose to include the naval lasers and things of that nature, then in that case, he'd scale much higher than that. All these informations functions at the end to convey that Shigaraki is simply superior to the King of Curses in every regard. Although things can change a bit if planetary is what you believe Sukuna's current level is, with obviously excluding the notion of him exerting enough punch force to destroy the planet, or that every single slash he performs can do the same thing. It would obviously be something he can do by time and not in a single go, or maybe he can just channel that much energy using his fire arrow inside his own domain to considerably boost its destructiveness. Now, strictly speaking, if you choose to highball Sukuna that way, then he would certainly be superior in terms of attack potency or destructive capacity in a general sense, and still be much inferior in the speed department. But let me tell you why this would not be a problem for a character like Shigaraki, with displaying all the potential possibilities that would occur in this fight, with obviously including both of these characters' hacks. Now, with Sukuna observing that Shigaraki has no problem tanking or dealing with his normal cleave and dismantle, he would have no choice but to do the same thing he did with Mahoraga, employ his domain expansion to quickly delete Shigaraki. You see, the problem here is that if a character like Gojo can tank and withstand that many slashes and not die instantly, it's only safe to assume that Shigaraki, with his instantaneous super regeneration quirk, would also be able to replicate the same thing, if not even better. Shigaraki has been shown on a multitude of occasions being capable of withstanding heavy, continuous punishment for a long period of time, which would make him use his superior speed to quickly exit of the Malevolent Shrine 200-meter range, allowing him to survive Sukuna's domain despite not having prior knowledge about the sure hit attacks. Same argument goes for the Dimensional Slash and his fire arrow, as Shigaraki can just dodge them with his superior speed. But you see, Shigaraki's DK is the most pressing ability for Sukuna in this matchup. With him obviously not knowing about a hacks of this magnitude, he would just certainly at some point get tagged by it no matter what. With that clear difference in speed, there's no way Sukuna could avoid a close range confrontation. He'd need to be floating at the sky all the times or constantly depleting himself to know where the decay would be coming from, since Shigaraki's proficiency of controlling his quirk allows him to not affect certain areas and objects to not be disintegrated. Remember that Sukuna himself has stated that a direct hit from an attack like Purple would surely end his life, and even if he uses reverse curse technique to heal, it would still be futile. Same thing goes for DK, since it disintegrates literally everything in just an instant, which would make this not close and Shigaraki would obviously be the last one standing. However, if we choose to believe that DK has no limit and can basically bypass durability, then saying the same thing about Sukuna's Dimensional Slash would only be fair, meaning it's simply a matter of who hits the other first with their overpowered hacks. And unfortunately for Sukuna, Shigaraki has the superior speed to be the first one to make contact and dodge his Dimensional Slash. You see, it's very important to understand that the ability DK is such an overpowered hack that I feel like no character aside from Satoru Gojo in the JJK verse can actually deal with, since DK can obviously not disintegrate infinity. But sadly, Sukuna just doesn't have a defensive mechanism of that magnitude, and even when you highball him to the max, it still loses to a much faster, durable, and cheated of a character like Shigaraki Tomura. So in this context, Shigaraki Tomura would be the last one standing. Now thank you so much for watching this video, and please do not forget to join the Discord server and become a member if you want to. Until next time, please take good care.